And welcome to Education, Leadership, and Beyond, Surviving and Thriving. My name is Andrew Murata, host of the show. It is show number 97, and I'm excited to be back on. The last show live here on Facebook and on Disrupt Ed TV was over about a month ago. I took some time off. I went away with family. I unplugged a little bit. But happy to be back on and get going again, get some professional development here, get some podcasting, get some learning going on. We have a fantastic guest on the show tonight, Joshua Stamper, hailing from Texas. And we are going to learn a lot from Josh. He is a master podcaster. He's an educator, assistant principal. He's a parent of 5. He's a foster parent, adoptive parent. You know, there's so many things that we're going to talk about with Joshua. So I appreciate him making time to be on Education, Leadership, and Beyond. But it is great to be back with you. I really missed it. I did. I enjoyed the time this summer with my family, but I certainly miss being with our Education, Leadership, and Beyond audience and you know, doing this, learning, right, and being it. If you're watching live tonight, leave us a comment, leave us a question. My number one fan is on. I see her there. My mom. Hey, Mom. I always appreciate you tuning in. And but leave us a question or comment for Joshua tonight. I want to thank our sponsor, Rocketbook, tonight. I'm going to learn a lot, and I'm going to write it here in my Rocketbook. If you haven't heard of Rocketbook, write it down, rocketbook.com. It is a reusable notebook. It is a smart notebook. And you can save your notes, save your sketches, save your stuff to your Google Drive. You can email it. You can Dropbox it. You can share it with other people. There's a ton of great things you could do with it. And I'm so happy to announce tonight on show number 97, Rocketbook is going to be making an Andrew Murata version, an education leadership version. It'll have my logo and stuff on it. So we'll be getting that out on my website and stuff very soon. So shout out to Rocketbook for that. Before we bring Joshua on, the opening segment tonight, my opening theme is, what's going to be your opening theme? When you start school here up in the Northeast, in New York, we're starting next week. Pennsylvania just started. I know North Carolina just started. Joshua down there in Texas, he might have been in school 6 weeks already. But no, I know he's been in school a couple of weeks down there in Texas. But what's your theme? When you meet the kids, when you meet your staff on the first day, what are you going to be sharing with them? What is going to be your points of emphasis for your school year? That kind of stuff, you know, I know you have it ready, and I wanted to share mine with you tonight. Mine is, or ours at Port Jervis High School, is going to be Carry the Banner. Joshua and I were talking off air about the great Jimmy Casas, educational leader, author of Culturize. And I had a chance to go to his session at the National Principal Conference. And he used that phrase, carry the banner, that we as education leaders need to carry the banner for our profession, but also for our schools and our communities. So that is going to be my challenge to my staff and my students and my community of Port Jervis, New York, of carrying the banner, doing great things for our school and community. And, you know, what are the ways in which we can do that? There's so many ways, right? You can do positive things on social media. You can do community service. You can be kind to your fellow classmates and fellow colleagues, supporting one another. You can join clubs and activities. You can volunteer. There's so many. I could go on and on. But every person can be part of that in carrying the banner. So that is going to be our opening theme in Port Jervis. And, you know, students have a lot of responsibilities in front of them. But this is a responsibility for all in your schools and community. And there's so many ways to do it. So that's my question to you. That's my challenge to you. Certainly, you can use that theme also. If you're starting school next week and you're still scrambling, saying I don't know what I'm going to open with, try it. Carry the banner. Check out Jimmy Casas and Culturize, and you'll learn more about that. But there's a ton to do. If I could help you with that in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. Andrew Murata 21 on Twitter is my Twitter handle, and certainly on my website, andrewmurata.com. Enough of all that. We are going to bring in tonight's guest. There he is, live from East Texas, Joshua Stamper. Welcome to the program, Joshua.
Oh, Andrew, it's such a pleasure to be on your show.
This is exciting, and it's a little nervous here. I got an excellent podcast on the other line, so I got to bring my A game tonight. I
don't know about that. You do a wonderful job.
Yeah, well, we've learned from each other, and you were nice enough to have me on your show, and Josh and I were able to connect through social media, right? I followed his work, he followed mine, and we're helping one another and supporting one another in these ventures. So, Josh, with that being said, the name of your show is Aspire. Why don't you tell me, how did you get started doing it? And I love the name. Where did you come up with that name?
Sure. So the process really was, in my last district, I was building a program for aspiring leaders. And with that program, we had about 6 sessions through the year, and it was just kind of that in-house workshop model of really getting in there and giving our teacher leaders experiences to really hone in their skills and see if they even wanted to be an administrator. And really was just kind of open to, here are some more opportunities for you throughout the district. It wasn't just honing in on the administrative piece. A lot of them thought they wanted to be administrators, and through those 6 sessions, they kind of learned if they wanted to aspire to be an administrator. So through that process and through that workshop model, I found just this longing of growing more leaders through that. And the program was so successful that the district actually took over the program, and they took it over completely. And so I was kind of looking for some way to provide that professional development to others. And so I sat down with some really good friends and just kind of hammered out an idea of what that would look like. And so we talked about blogging, and I actually had another person I was talking about even co-hosting a podcast, and it kind of ended up that I did it myself, and Aspire just kind of sounded kind of like the program I had before. It was aspiring leaders and what we were doing. So that's kind of where it developed from.
Very cool. And how long ago was that, Josh? And and then from that workshop ending to the start of the program, how long did all of that take?
It took kind of a decent amount of time. It probably took about 6 months because, that program ended at the end of the school year in May. And then I didn't actually come up with the idea. I sat down with Jeffrey Veal, and we had breakfast together, and he's one of the creators of Lead Up Chat, and really came up with the concept of, what would a podcast even look like? And he just kind of was my sounding board in regards to the podcast. And also talked with Todd Nasloni. He was into the Kids Deserve It podcast at the time, and just kind of used him as kind of a director of kind of what was the logistics, kind of what me and you talk about quite a bit of, just the process and what does that look like on the technology side? What does that look like as far as getting guests, that, just the ins and outs of the podcast. So between those two guys, I really found my niche and the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you say, Joshua, how about asking the questions, right? You and I could talk probably for hours, and I have a question list here. And now, just talking with you a couple minutes, I have a question that's not on the list here, which is about asking questions for the guest, and then when they say something, do you go off script, or you keep moving forward? How do you pick that balance of, should I keep going down this path with this guest?
Yeah, that definitely is kind of the balance. I'm much better about it now than I was a year ago. So I've started the podcast over a year ago, and I was very scripted when I first started. I had a bank of probably 20 questions, and most often I would hit the majority of those 20 questions. Now I've probably got a bank of about 50 to 60
Mm-hmm.
of different topics, but it really is responding to, like you just did, off the cuff. Okay, I have another question I want to ask to help the guests expand on this topic, and so I'll ask a follow-up question. So it's probably now more 50-50 of impulsive questions that I am asking versus the scripted what I have of my bank.
Yeah. And I thought you did an amazing job of really listening. Sometime as the guest, as the host, you have to carry the guest. But most times, if you're talking to somebody that has something to say, you kind of just let them go. But you did a fantastic job of listening on your program and not interrupting the person.
No, I honestly, the podcast, I wanted to not be about me. It's about amplifying the voice of those who have been in their role and their experience and trying to allow them to express as best they can. So I definitely feel like my role is getting out of the way and hoping that they're able to provide just wisdom and knowledge to my listeners.
Cool. Joshua, let's shift gears a little bit to your real job, your daytime job. You are currently an assistant principal at a middle school. Why don't you tell us your journey about how you got to that, and then we'll follow up with what's your theme this year. So tell me your journey about getting to that administrative role.
That's a long journey, Andrew. I don't know how far we want to go back, but my role before even in education, I was a graphic designer, and up in Minnesota, the economy was really struggling and my job got dissolved. And so I had to really think about what career path I wanted to take. And thankfully I have a fantastic wife who guided me and directed me toward my passions, which was art and soccer. And so I went back to school at Bethel University, where I got my undergraduate and took night classes and was a paraprofessional and a coach, a soccer coach at the high school level, and went through that program for 2 years. And at the end, got my licensure to become an art teacher. And when I was trying to find a job in Minnesota, it was really, really difficult. It was really teaching off a cart half-time, or half-time at one campus, half-time at another. And there really was not an ideal situation. So we just had our first child, and we were looking at Texas of all places because my in-laws were down here. And so we flew out, and I told my wife if we could get a job over the weekend, then we would move down here. And lo and behold, we both got jobs that weekend. So we packed up, and 2 weeks later or a month later, we were moving down. So from there, I was an art teacher and coach for 6 years at Murphy Middle School in Plano ISD, and then was promoted to Dean of Students, where I did that for 1 year at Frankfurt Middle School. And then the next year I was promoted to assistant principal at Renner Middle School, where I was for 4 years, and then just made the change. And this is my second year in a new district, Frisco ISD, and this is same city I live in, and still in the same role as an assistant principal.
Okay. And, you mentioned the name of your podcast is Aspire. Is aspiring to become a principal something that you feel that, because once you've been assistant principal for 5, 6, 7 years, that can wear on you a little bit. Yeah. Is this something that's, knocking at you now to become a principal? Is that next for you?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that was always the goal, was to be the leader of a campus. And so that's definitely something I'm aspiring to do. I did make the change to a new district, so I did feel like I might be taking a step back to take a step forward. And there were a lot of reasons why I made that change. One, it's closer to home, but two, I just felt like I needed to grow in some other areas, something I was lacking in, and really had to take some time to self-reflect and decide, okay, what areas would make me a better leader. And I just had to make that decision that the campus I was at was not the place to make that growth. So although I'm, entering my 7th year, I do feel like I can always grow to become a better leader. So although I'm content in the place I am right now, in the moment, most definitely I feel like in the near future I'll be wanting to take that step forward and become a principal.
And I wish you the best in that journey, Joshua. Hosting the podcast and meeting such great educators like Todd Whitaker and Jimmy Casas, people that you've mentioned here, Eric Schinninger, tell me some things that you've taken from them and literally go into work in the next day or two and start implementing some of those things. Tell me some of those leadership characteristics that you've learned over the years hosting your podcast that have helped you grow as a leader.
Oh my goodness, there are so many opportunities that they've provided as far as growing in my leadership, and it's more. I don't know if it's like specific tangible things that I've actually taken from them and implemented on my campus. I think it's more philosophies and looking at students, the community, my teachers, how to handle certain situations. I think it's more about mindset and that growth than actual like taking initiatives that they talk about and implementing it into my campus. Um, I think it's more just, I don't know, this is probably the same for you too, is just after you get done with a podcast, you kind of sit there and you reflect on everything that they said and how that correlates to your own campus and correlates to your own self. And I don't know how you feel about like journaling or blogging or that type of thing, but a lot of times that's where a lot of my concepts come from, or even doing like a bonus podcast is maybe taking a concept they talk about and talking about that even further in my own journey and my own experience. So, it's more just overall philosophy, for instance, like with Eric Schenniger, it's like technology and his concept of taking technology and what is that role of technology on a school? Does it really enhance learning or does it take over learning? For instance, is a teacher even needed? Well, no, obviously technology is that support piece. Obviously it's there to help, but it's not going to be the sole proponent to create growth with students. So it's more, again, just a hierarchy of concepts and how can that be translated to my own campus? Because everyone's campus and their own experiences are different. The kids on my campus are going to be very far different to someone that's talking about a Title I school. I don't work at a Title I school. I have in the past, and some of those concepts would easily translate, but for where I'm at right now, I kind of have to mold it and shift it to make it my own and for my own kids.
Sure. And you mentioned about the philosophies, right? Sometimes us as school leaders, we listen to the loudest staff members.
Yes.
Whereas then Todd Whitaker has always said,
Mm-hmm.
right, you listen to your best staff,
Yep.
not the loudest staff. And that's something that he said. I've heard him say it on your show. I've read it in his books. And right, you take that philosophy and then, you start, you don't need to just listen to the loudest person or the person who complains the most in your office,
Yeah, and with Todd Whitaker too, like he's talking about everyone else is watching that teacher and how you react to that teacher and how you handle that teacher. And if you let it go and you let that behavior continue, well, obviously those other folks are going to see that and they're going to follow suit. So yeah, Todd Whitaker was amazing about talking about like how to handle best teachers and your staff. I thought he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah. You're working in a middle school now, Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
Those kids are squirrely, that age. How do you manage that age? And then certainly, how do you manage these things with those kids, down there in Texas? I know they're the same as here in New York.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's only so much as far as control. I mean, obviously we're a campus that loves technology. We want them to be able to use technology, but at the same point, you want to provide expectations with your middle schoolers. They have to know what those expectations are. So with our campus, what we do is a kind of a green light, red light, yellow light as far as devices. Every classroom has that, and they have that on their overheads and on their doors. So that way students know, okay, this is a day that we're going to use our device. Obviously with technology, we have an email system. So we email our students constantly. So our teachers are going to give them that opportunity to look and see their email and see where they need to go for tutorials, or we have an in-house during the day. We have a tutorial system too, and they need to know where they're going for that. So obviously we're going to have technology. It's just a matter of making sure that as a campus, we are consistent with our expectations. So if one teacher is allowing free time on their devices for, let's say, 10 minutes, and no one else on that team is doing that, obviously we're setting a precedent for that kid to then pull out their device when they're not supposed to in someone else's class. So I think for an administration staff, it's just making sure that our staff across the board is consistent with the expectations.
Yeah, it's a balance. And I know the phones can be a headache sometimes, but we have to teach these kids how to use them appropriately.
Most definitely. And I think that's part of the role that we need to do as educators, is to teach our students how to be digital citizens. And a lot of times my role as a assistant principal is to deal with discipline. And And 1 year in the past, when we looked at the data, it was like 70% of our discipline was related to technology in some way. And
Wow.
that was staggering. So at that point, we really had to look at, okay, what are we going to put in place to make sure that we're more consistent on our end as the adults to make sure our students are doing a better job with the devices.
That's good that you identified that thing, but yeah, it's continuing to grow. Josh, you mentioned, about things being consistent in your district and working with your principal. I currently have an assistant principal who's been in her role for 12 years, and I have a brand new who's going, he's really not even completed a whole year. Tell me about the relationship, how do you support your principal in the things that she is doing, and then vice versa? How do you feel that she supports you, certainly with dealing with all the circumstances that you have on a daily basis?
So, like I said, this is my 7th year being an assistant principal. And so it's been interesting because I've had 4 principals that I've been an assistant principal for. And so my role, I always feel like, is to support them in their initiatives and their beliefs and how they're wanting to direct and move a campus. And they're the visionary. That's their role. And then I'm more of about implementation. What is the process? How does that look? How do I get everybody on board? How do I delegate? And so I know those roles are very, very different. Some of that is also on her. But I need to be in a supporting role. That's where I'm at, as far as working with my other APs, it's very different because my last district, it was a dean of students. And so they handled, if not most of the discipline with students. And so my role was very different because, I was creating the master schedule and I was looking at more of the logistics of the campus. So I was doing a lot of legwork without the disciplinary piece of it, where now I'm in a role where I have to do both. So it's more of a balancing act of trying to get things done logistically and about the campus and, getting in team meetings and working with my different subject matter, but then also having ARDs and discipline and all those other things that go with the job. So I feel like my role now is more of a balance. When I had a dean student, I felt like I was providing a lot of mentorship in that aspect because they were trying to become an assistant principal. That was their role, was to get up to that level. So I had probably more opportunities to teach, whereas as 2 APs, we're equals. So we're collaborating more, which I enjoy. It's a different balance, but it's just a different job. But for now, I really, really enjoy the collaboration piece because, if we're working on discipline, I have another person that's also working on discipline with their alphabet. So I get to come in, okay, let's put our minds together and how do we go about this and almost calibrating ourselves. I handled this situation this way. How did you handle it that way? And I feel like we're more successful moving forward because of that balance.
Yeah, you have to be consistent. Every situation stands on its own, but if they're in the same ballpark and you're getting 2 opposite punishments, they're coming to you saying, "Hey, Mr. Stamper, what's going on?"
Yeah. Why do you hate me?
Joshua, you were so candid in our pre-show work and sharing about your life, and you've mentioned your wife a number of times. But you and your wife are doing some special things, raising your family. Can you tell me the story about, your 5 children, and you've adopted 3 of them, and, your foster parents as well, and you've become trained in, being trauma-informed parents and education leaders, and also about the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
Tell me about that part of your life with your wife.
Yeah. So we have 2 biological children. And then after that, we felt the call to do something different. And so we really looked in a whole host of different ways. We looked at international adoption. We looked at domestic adoption at the time. I don't know if you've ever looked into it, but it's just crazy expensive to do either one of those things. And the time commitment overseas, some countries require you up to 6 months of time to actually be in the country. Wow. And so between the time commitment and the financial commitment, we just decided that wasn't really an option for us. So through our church and through some close friends, we found some other folks that were fostering. And so we actually went over to their house and had dinner with them and just kind of picked their brain about the process and their testimony of what that process looked like, even though it was difficult for them. And it was very rewarding, and we could see just the love that they had for their adopted children. So we went through the process, and it took about 6 months to do our home study and get licensed. And from there, we were placed on what's called an emergency list, where they can call you in the middle of the night. And so that's actually what happened. A couple weeks later, we got a call at 12 o'clock at night and said, "Hey, we got a 2-year-old. Would you take him?" And so, of course, we said yes. And so they brought him to the house. And so it was about 1 a.m. and it was just a bag of clothes, a blanket, and a couple diapers, and that was it.
Oh my
God. For us, it was quite the experience to just try and say, this is our kiddo. We don't know how long he's going to be with us, and what's that going to look like.
2 years old.
Yeah. Oh. And so through that process, we just knew that, because when they train you, they tell you want to, the goal is always for the child to go back with the parent. So you really have to train your mind and your heart to say, okay, we don't know how long this child's going to be with us, and our goal is that they go and are reunified with their parents. And thankfully, the child that we had our first placement did go back to their parents, and it was a success story. And from there, we've been licensed, and we've for 7 years, and some off and on, and we've had 5 placements, and of the 5 placements, 3 we adopted. So it's been an incredible blessing, and so much so that we actually are almost licensed again, looking for kid number 6.
Wow. That's amazing that you opened your hearts and your home and did that for kids that come to you as strangers, and now that they're your children. What were the ages of your children? Like, give me the order. Are your kids mixed in age-wise, or how does that work?
So
you can give them a shout out to on the show. I'm sure
What's
they're
that?
watching. You can give them a shout out on the show.
Mila and Landon, they're our oldest. They're our biological kiddos, and we always wanted to keep them the oldest, and that was just something that we chose to do. As far as family dynamics, we just felt like they were 1 and 2 as far as order, and we wanted to keep it that way. So honestly, it just worked out that the ages were consistent. So it's 12, 10, 6, 5, or I'm sorry, 7, 6, and 4. There's so many ages, but they came to us in order in that way, and so we've been fortunate as far as age and the placements that we've got. The boys that we got, all of them came to us 6 months or before, so they were pretty young when we got them.
Wow.
I mean, that's not always how it works, but that's our story.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And kudos to you and your wife. Josh, tell me about your own wellness. You're a young man. You're a busy assistant principal. You're doing great work with your podcast. And you got 5 kids under that household right now. Yet you're out here sharing with others and making time to do this. Tell me about your life balance and your own wellness, in this journey.
Sure. So with wellness, I feel like everyone needs to have their growth in their niche. And for me, I feel like my growth is not only my body, but my mind. And so my podcast is just part of that. And we talked before about this subject of, I don't want to be a person that's stagnant. I don't want to be a person that is content with my role and my position, and just, I don't know how else to say that, but just my mind. Like, I don't want to be stagnant. I don't want to be still. I am one that is always moving. And that's kind of my personality. When I was in school, I wasn't very successful. And I think because of the reason for that was because I had to move. I'm very kinesthetic. And so my lifestyle is very similar to that. I need to exercise. I need to move. I need to go. And even as a teacher, I was almost crawling through my walls because I felt contained within the four the four walls that I had.
Sure.
Where my position now, I can't blink without somebody calling me on the phone, calling me on the radio, email me, doing something. So I think I strive in that controlled chaos and that constant movement. And that's kind of how I am at home too. I thrive with having a lot of kiddos here. Like, I enjoy it. It's never a dull moment. And so I think I work hard and I play hard. I give my all and a lot of hours to my campus, but I also give my all at home too. When I try to be diligent about designating time. So when I get home, I'm playing with kids. Once they're in bed, that's when I work on my podcast. And then once I'm done with working on the podcast, I spend time with my wife. And I think having the diligence to make sure I break down my time is healthy. It gives me and it fulfills me as a person, because family is obviously the most important aspect of my life. And then everything else falls in between.
Yeah. That time management, extremely important, managing the schedule and all of that. Josh, the trauma-informed training and the ACEs and what you're doing for kids that have been through some rough times that you've adopted, how has that impacted you as a school leader for maybe that kid that isn't performing well in school or is causing some problems in the classroom, and now, boom, they land in front of Joshua Stamper, the assistant principal, yet who has a mindset that there might be something behind that poor behavior? How have these experiences in your personal life helped you as an educational leader?
Immensely. Honestly, when I went through the training, I was kind of, one, I was naive, but I was kind of irritated because I was already a parent. Why as a parent am I having to go through the training to become a foster parent when I'm already doing this? And I felt like I was doing it well. Little did I know that the training was probably the most beneficial aspect of me as a leader and handling student discipline. The trauma-informed care just really provided me a sense of knowledge to understand that behavior really is a language. Our kiddos are doing things because of an experience, most often trauma that they've received in their own life and have experienced. So the ACE test is just one of many things that is used to really assess student trauma. But with that assessment, it's not that I'm trying to solve the trauma. It's just to know that there is trauma, so that way I understand that when I'm interacting with a kid, 67% of students have trauma in their life in our country. That means that that's the majority. So when I'm interacting with a student that has trauma in their life, I'm going to then use strategies to de-escalate the situation. Where a lot of times what I'm seeing, and this goes with any staff, any campus that I've ever been on, is that they assume that this student is healthy and whole and is like their own child in that sense. They speak to them as if nothing is wrong, that they've had this, magical, beautiful life. And they come at them without having a relationship with them and without knowing their experiences, and provide pretty harsh, in their volume and sometimes even in their speech about directing the student and trying to correct their behavior. And what I'm trying to do is say, no, there's a better way of doing that. There's a better way of communicating. And if we understand that there's trauma in their life, then obviously we're going to take a different route as far as correcting the behavior. And the other piece of it too is changing my perspective of what punishment is. A lot of times what we do to our students as in regards to punishment is really more for the adult than it is for the kid. And so changing that perspective of, okay, the true reason I'm here is to teach these students about their choices and about their behavior. Well, how am I sending them to ISS or sending them home to an apartment complex full of drugs really going to help these kids? Yeah. How is expelling them and sending them to who knows where going to help that child? So working in the Title I school, seeing ISS, OSS not work, it was just pumping kids out into the community to learn how to do even worse things that they were doing in the school. And then the trauma-informed practices, it just made me realize that the system in schools are broken in regards to discipline, and how am I going to correct that?
Yeah, and the attention that has come out of the ACEs survey and leading with empathy and all of that, I think is helping. And people like yourself that are having podcasts to get this word out is helping also. But that's powerful, man. And again, kudos to you and your wife, for doing that for kids and growing as school leaders, man. That's cool.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to get to rapid fire because I know you have some quiet time with your wife coming up here. And, it's getting late here in the Northeast. Joshua, these are our rapid fire questions. Quick answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Last book you read.
Last book I read. Let's see. Actually, I have it on my desk.
Here we go.
A Passion for Kindness right here.
Okay. Yeah. So who's the author there?
Author is Tamara Letter. I just had her on the podcast. And
okay.
Man, our world needs kindness. Our country needs kindness. And so it's a journey that she had when she turned 40. She started to do an item of kindness every day. And it's kind of her journey and what that kind of turned into. And it turned much bigger than she ever realized. But it was phenomenal. I definitely recommend it.
Cool. And I saw that with your podcast. I'm going to have to listen to that on the way to work tomorrow. I want to give a shout out to Peggy Fitzgerald. She is watching here. She wrote in here, student behavior changes with conversations, not consequences. So
yes.
Kudos, Peggy. Joshua, last movie you saw?
Oh, goodness. In the theater, probably Spider-Man. It's been a while.
you took one kid, two kids? How many did you come
My two oldest went, yeah, cool. And they loved it. We're Marvel geeks around here, so.
Cool. You grew up, were born in California, grew up in Minnesota, and live in Texas. Where's your favorite place to travel?
Somewhere in the middle, Colorado. We go every summer, and it's absolutely beautiful.
It is. It is. What's the greatest challenge in your work, Joshua?
Challenge. Probably just getting everyone on the same page in regards to vision. I think we're making strides, but when you have 100 staff members, trying to make sure that we're all aligned. We're doing some pretty big initiatives this year with standards-based grading and restorative practices. And obviously people come with their own experiences and their own beliefs and their own biases, and to try and align everyone to get everyone on the same page is always a difficult thing.
Amen, brother. That's a good answer. Something that motivates you, Joshua.
Something that motivates me. Well, I can talk about my student counselor from growing up. That motivates me.
Why don't you tell that story? We'll break from the quick rapid fire here. Why don't you
if you don't mind?
Story? Yeah, no, I think it'll be powerful. Absolutely.
So growing up, I think it was my junior year, I sat down with my guidance counselor, and it was pretty standard as far as, come on down, let's talk about your future, that kind of thing. And so when I sat down with him, he had printed out all my report cards from previous years and that current year and sat them down on the table and just asked me kind of what my goals were going into the future. And I had just visited campus college, and I said, at the time it was called Bethel College, now Bethel University. And he laughed at me and said, are you kidding? No, that's where I want to go to school. And he's like, you will never get in that school. You won't even get into a state university. You'll be lucky if you get into community college. And I just remember the fire that was inside of me after that conversation, because I just looked at him thinking, really, man, you're my guidance counselor. You're supposed to, uplift me and tell me how to get into college. Don't tell me that I can't get into college. And from there on, I was just dead set on proving him wrong. And so I can tell you right now that I got into Bethel College. I graduated from there, went back, got my teaching license, and got my master's from there. So that to this day still gets me fired up. I don't like being doubted. In my self-reflection, I was not very motivated at the time. And although it put fire in me and I really despised that man, it probably was the best thing that could have occurred in my life.
Wow. That's a powerful story.
So all that being said is, I think now, having that doubt back then was what I needed, but now I have the self-motivation to be the best. And obviously, my family is a huge piece as far as, making sure that I'm a good role model for my own kiddos. But also, my faith too, and just being a servant leader.
Yeah. Wow. There's that famous saying by Maya Angelou, right? You'll forget what they said or forget what they did, but they'll never forget how they made you feel. And obviously that counselor in that moment did not make you feel very good, but it lit a fire under you, and good for you for reacting. You've shared 3 stories here where you've had experiences and took action. The podcast, starting the podcast, meeting with that family to then learn about adoption and fostering, and with that guidance counselor, you're a proactive person, Joshua, getting things done, man. That's cool.
Well, with that, I mean, I think that was something that came with maturity, because I definitely was not like that growing up. I was one to kind of sit back and just let things happen. And I do sometimes have that laissez-faire personality. I kind of go with the flow of things, kind of even keel with that. But as I've grown up and through some mentoring and some influences that really were needed in my life, that kind of shifted my thinking and just determining that I just want to be the best version of myself. And to do that, you have to take action.
Very cool. Let's get back to rapid fire.
Let's do it.
What's a pet peeve of yours? Something that gets under your skin a little bit? Well, offsides in soccer, maybe? What's
At school, probably providing problems without solutions.
Oh, nice. Good
and
answer.
So, yeah, I don't mind problems. That's part of our role. Every day there's problems. But at least bring something to the table, and even if it's just a terrible idea, at least it's something you bring to the table.
Absolutely.
We can work through some, even that maybe a terrible idea has a glimpse of hope and practicality. So, if you got a problem, don't come to the table empty.
I like it. Best purchase under $100 that has made a great impact on your life.
Oh, goodness. Man, that's a tough one.
You're buying a lot of stuff for those kids,
the microphone I'm talking in. How about that?
Yeah. Did it get under 100? Because that could be hard to find. Okay.
Yeah, I got it on Amazon. I got the blue snowball here, so
makes you sound good.
Well, I don't know about that. Hopefully, but yeah, I don't know, man. There's so many books. Books probably came to my mind first. But I mean, there's so many I could talk about. Todd Wicker's 10 ways to be what is it? 10 ways to be a better principal. I'm botching the name. Kids Deserve It, obviously, with Ted Nelsoni and Adam Welcome. I could go on.
Yeah. What's the best thing about living in Texas?
Best thing about living in Texas. Honestly, I mean, we were 106 yesterday, so the heat was probably not the best thing, but year round, I think the average is 70. So, one of the main reasons we wanted to get out of Minnesota was just the cold, because there it's 9 months of snow. So at least here, we can be active. And, like I said, my personality is to go. So I don't like being cooped up in the house. I like to get out and, we have a pool that's amazing, to throw the kids in there, especially on a hot day. So, just the ability to be active constantly throughout the year.
Cool. Being a transplant there, is it required that you have to be a Cowboys fan now, or is that?
No, I'm a Vikings fan.
Do you get dirty looks there? Do you wear purple in the city? I mean,
well, in Dallas, there's so many transplants now, and there's so many companies that are relocating here that it's not just cowboy country. So it's pretty often that if you ask even a student, what's your favorite team, they're going to say probably someone different. But yeah, it's definitely cowboy country around here. But we got a lot of transplants, so I'm not alone. Every once in a while, you'll see a Adrian Peterson jersey or a Randy Moss or something old school that is in the areas, and I got to give a shout out to all my kids that do that. So
nice, yeah. Being up here in the Northeast, we are not Cowboy fans. We're just
I bet.
Joshua, a short-term personal or professional goal for you, 3 to 5 months.
3 to 5 months, just to grow the podcast. I think that's always been the goal, and not even for personal reasons. I just want to help people. That's honestly what it came about, was just helping leaders or aspiring leaders. So just wanted to continue to grow listenership and get the word out that if you are looking to become a leader, at least maybe this is an avenue to help you and to guide you professionally. I mean, obviously I talked about, our goals as a campus. We're doing a pretty cool initiative, and I can't take credit for it. We stole it from another middle school, but we've been doing it the last couple of days, and it's a part of the restorative practices, which is a technique called push-ins. And one of the things that we noticed last year was there was a disconnect between when a student was to send them to the office, and then they would receive their punishment, and then they come back into the classroom, and there was obviously a fracture in that relationship. And I kind of talked about that a little bit, about sending kids away to ISS. And so with that, the teachers wanted to have more ownership. And so what we've put into place is what's called a push-in. And what that looks like is when a student is acting up or maybe off task in the classroom, instead of sending them to the front office or send them to ISS, they will call for us to go into the classroom. And so we switch places. And so I'm teaching the class, and they're going out into the hallway, and they're taking a walk with the student. And we've got some questions if they want, as far as prompts, but at least it starts the conversation, and that way their relationship is growing, instead of it being just go away and get out of here. It's no, we're going to grow together. We're going to teach and learn how to behave and what the expectations are. And so we've done that. We're only like 2 weeks into school, but we've already had 3 or 4 of those, and all of them have been successful. And the student has come back into the classroom, recovered, and is still learning. So pretty excited about that.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Joshua, a longer term goal, 3 to 5 years for yourself.
Have my campus, have my own campus, man. That's the goal. So, hopefully in 3 to 5 years, I'll be in that spot where I can be leading many and hopefully helping a community.
Well, you're leading a lot now through the different avenues. I like 2 words you used here on the podcast. You called them campuses and kiddos. Those are I don't use those words, and I'm going to start mixing them in here. That was great. Joshua, you mentioned the podcast a couple of times. How can people find your podcast and learn more about you?
Sure. An easy way is just going to my website, joshstamper.com. The other way, just going on iTunes or Spotify, you can easily find Aspire, the Leadership Development Podcast. You can reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. And those are probably the most easy way to get a hold of me. LinkedIn, the Aspire podcast also has a Facebook page, so you can go on Facebook and search us up and find us on there.
Cool. Well, you picked up at least one fan tonight, because Dory Murata, my mother, gave you a nice compliment. So she's a fan now, and she's a loyal fan. So
that's awesome.
Josh, we usually end with a quote here. I don't know if you saw this here, but do you have a favorite quote or a mantra that you live by that you'd like to share?
Yes, I had this written on my board, and I actually have a blog post about it too, that I used with my students. At first, I used it with mentoring a student, but now it's definitely become my mantra. It's the quote is, "I never lose, I either win or I learn," and I think that's just it's Nelson Mandela is the person that said it, and I think that mantra, as an athlete, I mean, you and I know that's how you have to go about things. You may have the mindset that, okay, I failed, I lost, but if you have a growth mindset, then it should really be about the learning. I didn't fail. I learned through this experience, and how am I going to win next time? So I think our students, a lot of times they get down on themselves when they've made a poor choice or they've made a bad grade. And so that mantra kind of helps them get past that moment, to understand that failure did not define them. It's about what you do in the future to overcome that failure.
Josh, you did a great job, man. I appreciate your candidness. Best of luck, with you, all those kiddos that you have there under your roof, and certainly this school year. We wish you the best. I appreciate you making the time here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Andrew. It's always a wonderful time to speak with you.
Cool. Follow, again, Josh. You can find him on social media. And then his podcast is Aspire, the Education Leadership Development Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, Joshua. I'm going to cue this music up and we're going to get on out of here. We will be in touch. Thanks for coming on. And again, guys, give Josh a follow. We're going to sign off here on Education, Leadership, and Beyond. If I can help you, again, on Twitter at Andrew Murata21. One more shout out to Rocketbook, our sponsor here. We appreciate that. Peggy's going to be listening tomorrow. The reusable smart notebook. It's a great tool. Check it out, rocketbook.com. We're going to sign off. Let me get this queued up here, Josh. Here we go. All right, everyone. We're going to tune out. Thanks for tuning in. Josh, again, great job.
Thanks, sir. Have a good evening.
All righty.